Okay, so we're going to talk about developing interactive self-assessment practice. Once again, like in a tutorial, I want to make sure all of you understand that when we talk about self-assessment, it's not your assessment. It's part of activity for students to self-assess themselves. Ideally, on the first page, students explored something, what you asked them to explore. Second page is something for them to try strategies they developed on the first page, understandings they developed on the first page, try and apply them without looking at the first page. And of course, if needed, they can go back and look. But the ideally, it's where they try and test themselves. So on this page, there will be also, like, remember, that will be your second worksheet, and it will be named practice, assessment, quiz, whatever. And you will have here on top the place for students' name and date, instructions. We've done it last time. I'm not doing it. We're going to go straight ahead into talking about the actual assessment. So on the top, you will provide all necessary information. Header, footer, you'll provide according to instructions. We're right now focusing specifically on how to make self-assessment. Okay, not a whole worksheet. So at this point, I would like for you to select cell B4. So our assessment will be related to whatever we did last week. So in other words, we did something of linear equations and a slope-intercept form. And so our assessment will be dealing with the same thing. It will be asking students what is the slope of a given equation, and they'll have to provide the slope based on the equation. That's what assessment we're doing. You can come up with a lot of other assessments, as I said, vocabulary and so on, look at some samples. So in this particular assessment, you're going to give students equations. So in B4, let's type word equation. So that tells them that will be given for them. So right now we're putting headings, okay? In C4, let's put word slope. That's where students are going to put their answers. In D4, put word correct, question mark. In other words, this is where it tells them whether they're correct or not. Again, these are examples. You can use your own words. In E4, let's put word points, or it could be word score. So that's where you're scoring them. And then, okay, hold on. Is that better? So I didn't change actual Excel, I just made magnification, right? And then skip F, and then in G4, let's put word answer. This is the answer key, which we're going to hide later. But we need an answer key in order to check. And you have to have minimum 5 questions. So your question numbers could be in column A. I'm going to put 1 and 2. We're going to make only 2 questions right now. And so again, remember, you have a name and date, instructions for students, what they need to do, and then this is actual assessment. I'm also not changing any formatting like fonts, colors. That's all up to you. That's what you're going to be doing yourself. Now, if you need to change column width, then you will have to change the column width. You can do it several ways. Let's say I'm planning to have long equations, and I feel like this may be not long enough. You can either put your cursor between B and C right on the line and just drag it to make it larger. Or remember, like we did last time, you can right click on the column and select column width and set up it as a fixed particular value. Let's say 15. And it fixes, in pixels in this case, it fixes the width of the column. Slope is going to be a number, so I may just keep it as it is, right? Word correct and points and the answer. Now, other part, again, row height. If you need to have sufficient height of the font, you can either drag it over here, but this is eyeballing, so you don't know how much you dragged, and you want each row to be the same height. So you have 5 questions plus heading. You might want to select all of those rows, right click, row height, and set the row height the same for all of them. And row height is determined in points. So if you're thinking about for students, appropriate font may be 16 points, but you may also have fractions there. So depending on how you want it, I'm going to put right now 20 for row height. So 20 points height for each row. Now, once again, if you want a specific font and you don't want to change it all the time, you can select all the area in the spreadsheet and change that font in the menu. But we are going to go with you in actual activities. So let's say our first equation is y equals 2x plus 3. So you type your first equation in the equation. And let's say our second equation is y equals 4 minus 3x. Notice this is just a text. These are not actual formulas. And you may have 3 more questions, right? This is the place for students to enter their answers. So it will be blank for students to start with. This column D is place where you're going to put a logic statement, an if statement, which tells if they select this answer, this is the result, like they'll get feedback correct and so on. Or if they select the wrong answer, it will tell them they're wrong. Okay? And in order to know, if statement compares two cells and determines whether the cells are the same or different. And that's where logic is. It's a logical statement. If two things are equal, there is one feedback. But if they're not equal, there is another feedback. That's how if statement works. It means we need the right answer. And that's why we have a G column. So in G5, the slope of the first equation is 2, right? So put number 2 here. This is the right answer. In G6, the slope of this equation is -3. So put -3 here. And you'll continue with other questions. So now we are going to write our first logic statement. Put your cursor in D5. So it's in the correct. So correct column gives a verbal feedback to the students. The points column gives them a score based on their. So let me make sure, if you don't have a ruler view, click on view and check formula bar so what we can always see the formula we're typing. And you're inside D5. Make sure double click, put equal sign, and put if. If is a logical operation. You open a parenthesis, and notice as soon as you do that, it gives you the whole syntaxes, like a hint. It tells you logical test. So logical test means we're comparing two things. Okay? So everybody has in D5 equals if open parenthesis. Now I want everybody to look at the board here. So what does this hint tells you? The first thing, logical test, that's a statement which you're going to compare things with, like something equals to something. One cell equals another cell, or one cell less than another cell. Whatever your logical test is for your assignment. Then there is a comma. There's a 3 parts here. Notice there is a comma, 2 commas, and 3 parts divide. Second part, what should appear in this cell if the logical test is true? And then comma in the last part is what should appear if logical statement is false. We are going here to have a little called embedded if statement. In reality, it should say following. If C5 equals to G5, right? So if answer is right, then they should say Yahoo! Or correct, or whatever way, depending on the age of the kids. You know, for 7th graders, you may say hooray, but for 9th graders, you probably say good job or correct. Then if C5 is equal to G5, the first thing which appears here would be a positive feedback. And then comma, but the next thing, what if it's not equal? Then it will be negative, like try again, you are not correct, and so on, okay? But what if there is nothing in C5? That's why we're going to have double embedded if statement, because if there is nothing, you don't want the kids to see try again, or oops, or you're wrong. Because if it's nothing, it should be nothing. Do you agree on that? That's why we have double if statement. So right now we're going to say, so if it is empty, keep it empty. But if it's not empty, then we have our whole other part. So type C5, and notice how it highlights this cell, equals. So first condition is empty. And empty, you put double quotes of nothing in between. So it's a shift and right by enter, right? Double quotes. This says if C5 is empty. So anything empty is double quotes. Then you put comma. So this is our logical test. It's checking whether C5 is empty or not. So if it is empty, what should be? What's the feedback here should be? Empty, which means double quotes. Because if it's empty, it should remain empty. We shouldn't tell them anything if they didn't put anything in. Then put a comma. But if it's not empty, it should test what they put in, right? Does that make sense? So after the second comma, you put another if in open parentheses. Because what we put in depends on what they put in. Now we're actually testing their answer. So now they put an answer in. So everybody have what I have right now, right? Elizabeth, Constance, how are we doing? So now we are testing. So now we're saying C5 equals, and in this case, we're testing whether they put the right answer, so it should be equal to G5 if they're right, right? So that's my logical test. I'm checking whether their answer is a correct answer, comma. So if it is correct, we need to give them a positive feedback. Positive feedback is a word. And words have to be put in quotes for the Excel, so it doesn't treat it as anything else, but only as a word. So for simplicity right now, open quote, I'm going to put yes, and close. Just to type less. You can put whatever you want. You can put them a whole like praise here if you want. But yes means yeah. Correct? Yes. Comma, and if it's not correct, what do we say? I would say no, it's shorter. No, because it's a one logical statement, which has three parts. Logical test, comma, if correct, what do we say? And if wrong, what do we say? So no. Oops, and no, I don't want to. And both words are in quotes, right? And I had two opening parentheses, so I need two closing parentheses. And notice what Excel does. It actually gives you colors, so that number of parentheses matches and the color matching. And then you press enter after that, and it's going to be empty, right? But if you want to know what you wrote, if you want to get back to the formula, click on it, and the formula is in the formula bar. And you can recheck the formula. So let's check all together. Click on D5 and make sure what you have is exactly what I have. Equals if, open parenthesis, C5 equals, quote, quote, comma, quote, quote, comma, open parenthesis, C5 equals G5, comma, quote, yes, quote, comma, quote, no quote, close parenthesis, close parenthesis. Is everybody checked? If you got any message that something is wrong, then something was typed wrong. And we'll check it after we finish this thing, because we're gonna do it one more time. Now, the nice part is you only have to type it once, because after you do it, you have 5 questions. All you need to do is to drag it down to 5 rows. Click on a cell, not double click, just click on a cell, and then you'll have a little black square at the bottom of the cell, and you drag it down to as many questions as you need, as you have. Let's check that it really worked. Click now in D6. Notice it did exactly the same formula, but for D6. And if you click on D7, it did the same formula, but for now it's row 7. So it filled down. So you only need to type formula once, and you fill down for all 5 questions that you have. Now, if you didn't do this right, we're going to do a second if statement for points. So I suggest leave wherever you are right now, because there is a handout which tells you how to do it. Don't distract anybody next to you. Let's go to E5 and try to now follow E5. We're going to do the same thing now for numbers, not for words, but for numbers. So it's scores. Double click in E5. It's exactly the same statement, but instead of yes and no, we're going to give them, I don't know, 1 point and 0 point, or 5 points and 0 point, whatever you want to give them for right answer, how many points, okay? So we're going to do it again by typing, even though we could copy, save, and change, but I want to make sure that we repeat it because it's a good practice. So put equal sign. You start with if, open parenthesis. Same idea, right? If it's empty, it should be empty, right? So if C5 is empty, it should stay empty. So we type C5 equals quote, quote, comma. So if it is empty, it stays empty. So quote, quote, after comma. And then comma again. But if it's not empty, it should test whether they were correct, right? So we're putting another if statement, open parenthesis. And it's the same test. We're checking C5 with G5. We're checking their answer with correct answer. So it's a C5 equals G5. Then comma. Now, instead of a verbal feedback, we give them a point. How many points do we give them for right answer? 1 point. So type number 1. No quotes, because it's a number. We want to be able to add those numbers. Comma, and if it's wrong, 0. And then close twice. And press enter. Now let's check if it's working. So let's put in C5 wrong answer. Let students confuse slope and y-intercept, and they put 3. Notice what happens. It tells them correct, no, points 0. What if they put the right answer, 2? It tells them yes, and it gives them a value, right? Check with the second one. Now, remember, we need to fill down column E. So click on E5. Find that little black square at the bottom of E5 and scroll it down to whatever number questions you have. Fill down, so you're filling down the formula to the other lines. So now if we're going to go to the second question, and let's say students did it wrong, it gives them a wrong answer, but if they did it right, it gives them a point and tells them it's correct. Last thing we're going to do with you, how to find a total score, right? Which is actually pretty straightforward. So let's imagine you have 5 questions total, 3, 4, 5. So on the line after last question, on the line after last question, somewhere you're going to put word total, right? So the students know that's their total score. So you put it somewhere. Not in the points column, because in the points column we have to find the sum. And then so in the corresponding, like I'm in D10, I put total, and E10, double click, put equal sign. So in order to find total score, what do? We add, right? And for add, it's a sum. So we can put the word sum, open parenthesis, and it tells you that you need to add all the numbers. So easiest way to do it, just to highlight all of those cells, select all those cells right in the Excel, and then close parenthesis, and then you press enter, and it gives you a score, total score. So you will be formatting. The last thing we need to do, students should not see the answers. You agree, right? Like, what's the point? So we're going to hide a column. In order to hide the answer column, you click on letter G here on the column heading. So the whole column is highlighted, right? Then now, if you right click, you'll see word hide. So you select that word hide. Does everybody see that? So choose it. Notice how letter G disappeared. We have F and then H. What if you want to go back? What if you want to get your answers back? So everybody was able to hide, right? What you are still editing and you decided to change one of the questions? You need to change the answer. In order to unhide, you have to select column before and column after. And then if you do right click, you have an option unhide. Okay? So that's how you unhide. And then that's how you hide, right? One column to hide, you right click, hide, but if you unhide, you select two. So the rest what's left here is to make sure students don't see formula bar, grid lines, or headings. You have somewhere places. Oh, and one more thing. Let me go back to grid lines and headings and formula bar. Remember that this particular thing, right, this column is where your students are going to be putting their answers. That's the only place where they're going to be putting answers. Plus name and date. You have to unlock those cells. First of all, let's make sure we clean them. Like, you don't want them to see the answers to start with, right? Make sure you select your answer column where students putting their answers. You select all those cells before you protect your worksheet. And then you go right click, format cells, and under protection, we did it last time, you uncheck locked. So when we lock a whole thing, this will be the only places where they can put the answers. They cannot mess up questions. Highlight and press delete on your keyboard. That means your formula is wrong, so we'll have to check. So that's pretty much it. The rest is beautification. Name and date, unlock cells for name and date, instructions for the students, hiding all the grid lines, headings, and formula bar. And then after you finish everything, you are going under review and you're going to protect your worksheet. And now the students can only enter information here and nothing else. Hold on. So here is the thing. Okay, we didn't finish. There's a couple of more things which is formatting. I said I didn't do formatting. Let me go back to view. Grid lines. You don't want to grid lines and headings, definitely. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that here you have each other line is alternate color. If you do want students to see those, like let's say you said I want to see those two lines, then go select format cell. Make sure format cells. And under borders, select the borders you want the students to see. So when you hide the grid lines, they can see that, for example, you want a left border, and maybe you want a little thicker. You want a left border and a right border, then say so. Then when you hide those grid lines, those borders will stay. You can do top and the bottom, and assignment requires you to use alternate colors for questions. So you will have to select those cells and select them with a different color, and preferably some pastel colors, so students can easily follow each question. So this is part of the requirements. You have to use alternate colors for different rows. But in addition, if you want to have any kind of borders, you definitely can do it. Like if you want to have this as table, represented as a table, then you do it through format cells. The grid lines everywhere else have to be hidden. Only you see the borders where the questions are. Okay? Okay, so this is, guys, this is really it. That's all on this. All you need is to think about good questions which are based on your activity. Now, these are simple questions. Notice these are not high order. Your high order will be on the first page. This is simple. It's like, make sure, like, let's say you had percents and you want to make sure they really understand how to convert decimals to percent. You have decimals, percents. Decimals are given, percents are not. Then they have to put them in. You had students talking about what happens to coordinates during dilation, right? Then you tell them up front, the dilation factor k, this is my coordinate x, what's going to be new coordinate, right? So you may have more columns here, okay, than I have. Depends on the tasks that you're doing. And some of you may do something else, like measurements or whatever we discuss, probability. Then you may have here in the first column a question, maybe, or say, you pull, what's the probability of? And then you have pulling 3 marbles out of 10, or whatever. You have a scenario, so your first column could be a longer and has a whole problem, and then they have to put a number in. But just make sure everything is working. And remember, the if statements, logic statements, work for numbers or words. But you probably want to deal with numbers. In other words, if you have a word, you type a word in, it will check word and it will check spelling, and it has to be exactly the same word. And it will also give you. So if you're doing vocabulary check, because you did something dealing, or definitions, which is dealing with other things, or properties, that could be a purely word kind of thing. Okay?